It's an exciting time. I really think we've hit an inflection point. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, the winners and the losers per se are really going to start to separate from the pack. And I think, again, those people that have the insider knowledge of how the industry works and the real life problems that consumers of insurance face, as well as the people who sell insurance, they're really, really well positioned. I'm Brent Hammer. I'm the Innovation Officer for Grange Insurance, and this is the future of insurance.
This episode is sponsored by Shift Technology. Shift is transforming insurance by transforming insurance decision making. From fraud detection and claims decisioning to underwriting, subrogation, and anti-money laundering, Shift's AI solutions are helping the world's leading insurers make faster, more accurate decisions at scale. Learn more at shift-technology.com.
Brent, it's great to sit down with you for an episode. This is, I should have had you on season 1. I feel like we're building up to it, but it's great to bring you in for season 2.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Brian. I'm really, really happy to be here.
I will say, we were probably just recording enough other webinars and in different meetings and stuff, but that's why we didn't do it last season. I was too busy recording other stuff. But it's cool to sit down with you.
Yeah, you've got enough B-roll of prior conversations between the two of us that you probably could have just piecemealed this together.
Yeah, or deep faked it or something. Well, all right. Well, on that note, this is real. There's no deep fakes here. It is the actual Brent Hammer. There's a lot I want to talk about. I want to understand your role, some of the things you do. Part of one of the things, why I want to sit down with you is how you're at the crux of so many conversations that I have with so many startups. You're recognized, and this isn't like a fanboying moment, but it is something I want to talk about, that how you've positioned yourself in that way to be someone that, all the startups out there are certainly serving the US market. You're on their radar. They want to get in front of you, and the access that provides. And this is a theme that's come up before. But before we get into that, who are you? What do you do? How'd you get to where you're at? Give us the background.
Yeah. So the journey to where I'm at now has been an interesting one, a fun one, I would say. So, I started my career in public accounting. Had no idea I was going to get into insurance, but my first client was an insurance company, and I sort of instantly became an insurance nerd. There's just something about the economics of this industry that are really challenging. You don't learn about them in business school. And so I really enjoyed that. And so I spent the better part of my career sort of in finance roles in insurance. And again, I'm with Grange Insurance. I've actually been with the company for 15 years. I've also kind of always been pretty inquisitive. And when the whole InsurTech movement started, sort of in the early to mid 2010s, I was, grabbed my attention right away. And about 4 years ago, Grange decided, it was time to commit capital and resources and form a formal innovation practice.
Yeah.
Now, why they chose an accountant to do that, the world will never know. But suffice to say, I'm really happy that I was tapped to sort of stand that up for Grange, and really, really happy with what we've accomplished over the last 3.5-4 years.
Yeah. Well, so for anyone who's like, oh, I can't because, and there's definitely people listening well, I just do this, or I don't know about this stuff or whatever. If an accountant can do it, surely you
That's
can
what
also,
I say.
right?
That is what I say.
It is for anyone who's it's accidental getting into insurance. It is really interesting because you don't have that background that people would expect. But I think that's also part of the magic of innovation, is the background sort of irrelevant. It's all the mindset and how you go about it.
Well, yeah. And Brian, I would even add that, sometimes the less you know about insurance, the more dangerous you can be. And when you get sort of and again, I won't go off on a tangent, but one of my favorite things to do is work with college students, and just they can play sort of the ignorance card. Well, why don't you just do it like this?
Yeah.
That's so impactful. It's so powerful.
I had a bunch of college interns this summer working on something with my books, and they went down this whole TikTok and Reddit direction. And I'm just I need to get a 7th grader as an intern or so, because I don't think I can get into TikTok. But you're right. And I never it was so far from what I thought the answer from that project was going to be.
Mhm.
Never ever would have framed it that way. And for anyone who's wondering, no, I don't have like dancing TikTok videos and memes and whatnot. But I appreciate the work they did nonetheless.
Yeah, no, appreciate it.
So let's not go down that tangent, but I do think it's fascinating to me that for people who are in your footprint, geographically, they probably heard of Grange, but for a lot of folks outside of it, kind of, strength in the Midwest, and you guys branch out beyond that a bit, maybe have not heard of Grange. Yet when I go around and meet with lots of startups, Grange is one of those companies that's on so many radar screens. It's, I was joking with you before and I'm like, oh, have you talked to Grange? Like, oh yeah, we know Brent Hammer. We reached out to him already. You are, Grange and you specifically are one of these focal points for a lot of the solution providers and the new emerging things. Is like, that's a company we need to talk to. Yeah. How does a Midwestern carrier, just cross over the $1 billion threshold? How do you hold as much space in that conversation as a lot of the tier ones that, the investors like, oh, well, you got to get one of the big names. And then you're like, you guys are on that same level. How do you do that?
Well, Bryan, first of all, I really appreciate the compliment. It means a ton. And, I think from the beginning, we've always had support from the top of the house. So our CEO is on the record as saying, we can't be afraid to, potentially disrupt ourselves, and that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so having the cover fire from our CEO and from our board has been really beneficial for me. And I would say when we got out there, when we started and we launched G-Force Innovations, which is sort of our innovation arm, our initial goal was, the InsurTech ecosystem is just so broad, it's changing so rapidly. We need to get multiple touch points, multiple access points into different areas. And so we were really deliberate in the first 18 months to form partnerships with people who had access and really just start to get as many hooks in the water as we could. And so that's from venture capital firms to incubator accelerator programs. And so we felt like we got really, really good access. And that was sort of step number one. Step number two was about being really deliberate around the problems that we were trying to solve. And so from the beginning, if something was a really cool solution, but it was sort of seeking a problem, that was an instant pass for me and for
which is
Grange.
So much of it is like, oh, great tech. I'm just not totally sure what it means to us.
And really we learned right away. We said, look, the core business, the SMEs in that business, they're the antibodies of sort of our internal ecosystem. And if they see something that scares them, they're going to attack right away. And so we've always positioned ourselves, or at least the innovation team at Grange has always positioned ourselves as trusted enablers to the business. And over time, as we've sort of validated that or corroborated that with the business, the sort of the top secret, and now I'm saying it on a podcast, but the super secret sort of stealth move, the next step is slowly establishing or moving a needle from trusted enabler to trusted disruptor of the business. And we're well on that path. Yeah, maybe I need to trademark that. But that's sort of our approach, and that was our philosophy. But the real magic, I think, the reason that I think as a regional company in 13 states, Grange gets mentioned in the same sentences as some of these national carriers. We're kind of a Goldilocks company, I would consider. And what I mean by that is, we're not so big that there's 20 different access points into the company. And to work your way up the chain to the CEO or someone who can actually make a decision is sort of this maze. We're small enough that if the CFO or the CEO is the right person for you to talk to, I can snap my fingers and we can make that happen, right? We're getting you to the decision makers right up front in the process, and we're funneling everything through a central point. So we're sort of small enough to have a really flat organization in terms of how we're able to engage insurtechs. on the flip side, we're also big enough, $3 billion balance sheet, over $1 billion top line. We've got the capital to sort of be movers and shakers if we need to be. And if we really believe in an entrepreneur or a specific, use case or business model, we have the more than enough means to sort of advance that.
Yeah. Well, so I agree with you on the Goldilocks positioning.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I think is it's like, Earth is perfectly positioned for life, but without some catalyst, it still doesn't happen.
I love that. Yeah.
Going back to your earlier point about leadership, buy-in, and support, because there are other carriers I know that are roughly the same size as you, some with more capital, some with less, that are nowhere near as engaged in the conversation, and certainly not as like centrally targeted or must have connection for the startups. We get one in particular that regional footprint, they're just under $1 billion, so just over, but lots of capital, and really not engaging at all in the conversation. They put a lot of resource internally on innovation, but it's very internally focused and they're not moving the needle. So I would say, like, yes to the Goldilocks thing, but it's the culture and the leadership and the willingness to, like you said, to be willing to disrupt yourselves. Like, that is a purposeful decision.
Yeah.
That you need that to catalyze. It's not enough just to be in this, like, we're big enough to matter and we've got the resources, but we're also not too big that we're too hierarchical or whatever.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. And, I think companies that Grange, just to be in full disclosure, before we sort of invested in the formal innovation practice, we were very, very focused on culture and having hackathons, trying to tease ideas out from our associates. And I honestly think you have to start that way. At some point, though, as a leadership team, you should see that inflection point where you're saying, okay, we've warmed the culture enough to the idea of doing things differently or being uncomfortable. Now is the time where if we actually brought an entrepreneur in or we wanted to do a joint venture, you need to sort of warm the business to even start to have those conversations.
Yeah. Well, so I've had the pleasure of being in your headquarters, which is an awesome space.
Thanks.
I've worked for some carriers that are very much like, we're open and all that. But if you look, it's like all the senior people are in offices, and the more junior folks, the line folks, are the ones out in the open floor plan. Grange feels different. And, I come from specialty lines most recently, and it is very unlike the UK model. It's like everyone but the CEO is out on the floor. And the only reason the CEO is not is because they would always be in some private meeting anyway. So it would just waste a conference room if they're on the floor. Yeah. I felt that with Grange is like, it is very open. There's a lot of communal interactive space, and having, been at a startup that was going through implementation with Grange, I felt that it wasn't just like kind of window dressing or a lot of talk, that it did feel there's a collaborative feel in the way that things are worked through.
Yeah, very, very much so. And again, the tone at the top, it's all there. Our senior leadership team, which I'm a part of, has been, they've had continuity for the last 6 years. We haven't added a new senior leadership team member. And the other thing is, when we did our strategy refresh in 2016, I would say the winds of strategic change are very, very calm at Grange. And part of that comes with being a mutual company, but that's the CEO and the board, and we know which way we're going to go. And again, we might tack a little bit back and forth on the way there, but having that continuity in leadership and strategy has just been a blessing.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome. And, yes, I got to see it internally, but I mean, honestly, Brent, there isn't a week that goes by. And if, like, for anyone's listening, like, okay, Bryan, we get it, you like Grange, but there isn't a week that goes by where you don't come up in some conversation with some startup. And I think that's huge. I mentioned I had Florian Grelot from Astoria VC on in a prior episode, and he talked about being central in the startup community and being someone who startups are seeking out. And some of my peers at carriers and like, I get so much outreach, leave me alone. I don't want any more like sales outreach. But he's like, the more the better, because I'd rather know something's there and make my own decision about it than have it be, totally hidden to me. I get that feeling with you too, is like, yeah, like let me sort through and filter it, but I want to see everything to know.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole, knowing is half the battle, right?
Yeah. G.I. Joe. It's a great philosopher to quote.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, yeah, I totally agree. And here's the thing. I really sincerely don't believe that any new tech or any new company is going to come and do a table flip like on the entire industry, right? Like it's a highly regulated industry that requires a lot of knowledge to be successful at. You're pricing risk at the end of the day.
Yep.
And so again, I think, some people we have the luxury of not having to look at everything, because I don't think anything's going to sneak up on us. But at the same time, if you can be a first mover, and again, if you can put some capital behind something that you really believe in, there are absolutely spaces where you can carve out sort of an unfair competitive advantage.
Well, so I want to get into, given all the access that you get and the stuff that you see, and you're in so many of these conversations, let's talk about what's brewing. And I get kind of two questions on this. One is like some specifics, like, trends or new themes of some of the solutions that are coming out, but also, I mentioned this to you before, the word like tectonic shifts. Like, no, I don't think there's a table flip moment from one startup insurer or another. But there are some moves happening, some dynamic shifts in the players and how they're coming in, the investment capital, that sort of thing. Can we talk a little bit about those sorts of trends?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe there are two main trends that I can speak to real quick. And these aren't solution focused so much as they are those tectonic shifts. I love that phrasing that you used. I think the one tectonic shift is that I think early on, especially with these new full stack entrants into the marketplace, that people didn't necessarily know how to value them. Again, we talked about the economics of insurance, and they're incredibly complex. Your acquisition costs are very high. New business is very expensive, right? The loss ratios are much higher on new business than they are on your retention book. And so growing is really painful from a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
So anyway, all that to say, one of the tectonic shifts that I see is that the market is starting to catch on. People who don't know insurance economics are starting to say, all right, of the light bulbs coming on, I know how to value sort of an insurance company, a company that is basically selling indemnification and pricing risk for their business. And so you're starting to see more realistic valuations in the industry. Now, what's really exciting is that's not scaring capital away. In fact, the opposite is happening. We're only in Q3, and already we're going to eclipse $10 billion invested in the insurtech space this year. More deals than have ever happened before. And so
by Q3, we were already above last year's number.
Yep. And last year was a record.
Right.
And so I think the combination of people getting smarter about the value and how to value insurance solutions, and the additional push of capital is getting us to a really interesting space on. So there's something out there, I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's Gartner's hype cycle.
Yep.
And so if you're not familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, it's pretty interesting. And it maps sort of emerging technologies or new trends as they come out. You always have this peak of inflated expectations coming, right? Yeah. And that's sort of that FOMO moment. Then after you sort of reach that crescendo, there's this trough of disillusionment, right? It's like, oh, it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. It's never going to work, right? And then once you kind of come out of that trough, you hit this sort of plateau of enlightenment, right? Of sustained, sort of real value.
Yeah.
I think we've gone through definitely that peak of inflated expectations. I think we're in that trough right now, and I'm just super excited that the capital is there and the knowledge is there, that I really think we're going to hit our stride in terms of actual measurable value, delighting customers, making products more affordable, making them more sort of risk management, risk prevention rather than risk indemnification.
Yeah.
I still think that's a ways out, but we're definitely through the bulk of sort of the whiplash.
Yeah.
And I think we're on the steady climb towards realization of everything we were promised,
Yeah.
right, from the InsurTech revolution.
I think I think you're right in terms of where we are. And it's not to say individual companies or their values don't need to settle out, or some may still be riding the wave up. It doesn't mean everyone's at the same moment.
Absolutely.
But you look at some of the early IPOs or SPACs, and you look at their valuations, it would imply that you're spot on.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say which ones I'm very much feeling the trough on personally or otherwise. But then there's also some deals that have happened. I mean, look, we're recording this in like mid-November. For anyone who knows the calendar of what's been going on, like in the past couple of weeks, there's been 2 InsurTech buying InsurTech deals that were announced. That I don't think would have been possible if we hadn't seen some troughing already because of the valuations.
100%.
So it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can actually be an enabler of some of the sorting out of who's going to win and lose, or who's going to survive through it. So it's interesting to watch. But yeah, I think you're right. And as the valuations get, in a lot of cases more reasonable, I'm just thinking about the Rivian IPO happened this week as we're recording this for EV watchers, and Rivian's very cool. But like they're now worth, I saw this morning, and I don't know what they're at as we're recording it, but like they crossed 100 billion this morning. They were 88 billion like last night. So worth more than Ford, even though Ford owns a good chunk of them. So good for Ford. Yeah. So Ford's worth more now just from the fact that they own a share of Rivian. But like having that sort of dynamic makes it hard for partnership and consolidation and some of the normal things that I think we'll start to see as we hit and move through that trough into something more sustainable.
Totally agree.
That would be interesting to watch.
Those are great calls. I mean, it's like we're in it right now, Brian. Like it's happening. Like all the news this last week has been crazy.
Yeah. And there's still tons more, as you're saying, on the investment side, there's still lots of capital coming in. So it's not like valuations are down and now everyone's dead. There's just still a lot of activity.
Well, and that actually that's actually a really good segue to the second tectonic shift that I wanted to talk about. And if you look historically at the capital that's been flowing into the InsurTech space, it's been coming from outside of the industry. So, venture firms that saw an opportunity in insurance, and investors that saw an opportunity there. The other tectonic shift that's happening, and this was, I'll theorize that AM Best might have been the catalyst, but AM Best, for the last 2-3 years has been talking about, and then eventually did introduce an innovation score for carriers that factors into their rating. And again, if you're a carrier, how important AM Best's opinion is. And so good for AM Best on realizing that carriers need to be paying attention to this, and leveraging InsurTech to help all of their stakeholders, their agents, their customers, their associates. But the shift that I think that has caused is you're starting to see way more capital from people who know the business start to flow in. You're seeing incumbent carriers doing more corporate ventures or getting serious about sort of creating their own greenfield startups, starting their own incubators. And again, I'm strongly of the opinion that you're not going to create the next, billion-dollar company internally, you've got to augment that with entrepreneurs outside of the business who are thinking about the industry differently. And so doing those joint ventures, doing those partnerships with founders that have proven to be strategically like-minded and add value for you. And so the money that's flowing in that has the insurance knowledge and expertise behind it is really exciting.
Yeah. And that could be setting up their own CVC activity. It could be coming as an LP. There's definitely a lot of venture funds that are backed by insurers, and there's new ones starting up all the time. No, I think you're spot on. Or a mix of the two, because there's folks who have CVC and are also LPs in other funds, because you can't always do, you can do different things as money behind a fund than you can do with your own balance sheet.
Diversification.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I fully agree with you on both of those tectonic shifts. What about, as we think, given that I sort of painted the picture that you see everything that's out there and everyone's coming to you. So what are some of the themes from a solution standpoint? Are there, have we moved from, it's all about efficiency gains in the process, or virtualizing because of the pandemic? Are there kind of topics that you see as like, okay, that's done, or it's settled and we've got solutions there? This is the next sort of journey that I see us hitting on.
So I think the companies that have sort of reached that plateau and are probably the most mature in the space are sort of the phrase analytics arms dealers, and right, the data folks. I think that has become really mature, and I think a lot of carriers got savvy to how they could augment their own models or could source certain things to really improve all aspects of the business. So I think analytics continues to be big. Customer experience, I think, is really big. The trend that I'm the most excited about is I've probably seen maybe 10, 12 insurtechs in the last year who were actually in the insurance business, either as an agent or relatively high up for a carrier. And they got the entrepreneurial bug and they sold their agency or they cashed out from the company and started their own business. And these are the ones where my antenna goes up like immediately, because you've got that entrepreneurial spirit. You saw a problem, and the fact that you came from the industry means that really is a problem that needed solving. Those things excite me a lot. And I see actually a lot of that happening in the distribution space. And so how can we, one, I think independent agents are always going to be valuable. Always. You need that trusted advisor. By anyone watching this, if you don't have an umbrella policy, buy an umbrella policy, right? But you need an independent agent to sort of tell you that sometimes, and make sure, you don't have coverage gaps. And what I'm seeing is people identifying coverage gaps and then going out there and creating a business around it. So really excited about that. I don't want to name the companies by name, but really the distribution space is just red hot right now. And I'm not talking about an MGA or anything like that. MGAs are good and fine, but this is more around connecting the customer with the carrier and really making it a delightful experience for them at the end of the day. I don't think I'm out of school when I say this, but Bryan, you're a consumer of insurance products, right?
Yeah, I've got a policy.
Is it a product you want to use?
No. No. The only one that I think ever comes to mind for people like that is health insurance for paying for the birth of your kid. But otherwise, like what on earth would, even for market research, I don't want to know how good you are in claims or not, right? Like I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah. And so again, I really am excited about one, trying to identify places where where customers have coverage gaps that they don't know about and trying to solve those issues, but also making insurance more affordable, and making it more valuable outside of just purely indemnification.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the engagement question comes in. I was doing a talk with an agent group, and one of the questions was like, you're talking about engagement and how some of these insurtechs are doing it, but we were always taught like, don't poke the bear. You sell it like, unless they have a claim, like, you don't want to talk to them because it's going to get them to think about shopping. Like, leave it be, because no one wanted the insurance in the first place. But a lot of the startups or the tools that carriers can deploy are about creating ongoing engagements to build a sense of connection to the product. Like some of the IoT sensors, and it's like, now my insurance is part of my home ownership experience and keeping my family safe, not just like, oh, I hope I never have to talk to them.
Yeah.
How else are you going to feel when your bill comes? But it's too expensive, right?
Well, and especially with people spending more time at home, these last 2 years, giving people, it's not just being at home, it's the mental stress that's been placed on all of us.
Yeah.
And if you can provide the peace of mind and protection that a customer otherwise wouldn't have had, that's the win. That's the win-win at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's funny. It wasn't until being locked in my basement for 2 years that I wanted a front door, like doorbell cam.
Yeah.
Even like when I wasn't here all day, I didn't think about like who's coming to my door or not. But now it's like, oh, I got to go upstairs. But I mean, it's a minor thing. But yeah, I'm much more aware of, and maybe I have a camera, so don't come by and think you're getting away with something. But I'm much more aware of my property and the status of it and what's going on with it. And I could say like, well, I'm here all the time, so why would I need any of that? But it's almost upped my sense of, I need to have these things and be more aware of it. And maybe because it's more front and center.
Yeah.
The exposure is more real to me. And then it's like, it's that thing, by the time I come back to it at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. So I don't really think about it.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. Yeah, it's an exciting time. I really think we've hit an inflection point in terms of, I think in the next 2 to 3 years, the winners and the losers per se are really going to start to separate from the pack. And I think, again, those people that have the insider knowledge of how the industry works and the real life problems that consumers of insurance face, as well as the people who sell insurance, they're really, really well positioned.
Yeah. Brent, I think you just gave me the best quote of the episode, and so I don't want to ruin it by rambling.
Oh yeah, what was
I
it?
think that was an awesome note to close up on. It was great.
Excellent.
Unless, like, if there's anything we didn't touch on, another tectonic shift or a trend or something.
I'll try to limit tectonic shifts to the number of feet I have. So two is
plenty.
Two is good.
Yeah. No, we don't need earthquakes and volcanoes. It was great. It's great to sit down with you. And you are in a very interesting position. Yes, a Goldilocks kind of size, and that creates a lot, but that in and of itself ain't good enough. There's so much else to it. So I appreciate you sharing kind of why you've been able as a company to take advantage of that great size, but actually do something with it and engage with the market as you have. And I know I speak for a lot of insurtechs who are very thankful for that approach, because it gives them a good partner or just a good set of ears to bounce ideas off of and get meaningful feedback from.
Yeah. Well, Bryan, thank you so much again for your kind words. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity to talk here. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. It's great to sit down with you, Brent. Hey, thank you to Brent for coming on the show. It's so great to talk to him. I'm really lucky because I actually get quite a few chances to connect with him through different events that we do together, or also through all the startups that I happen to get there to sit in front of Brent and the team at Grange. All the stuff we were talking about, there's lots of opportunities for that. He's an awesome guy. Grange is doing some very cool things, and it's not just their Goldilocks sides, which I think really does help and positions them really well, but it's their willingness to take advantage of that and cut through a lot of the excuses. Some are very genuine, but still excuses, still choices for us to keep in the way or choose to move through. And I think Grange has consciously decided to try to cut through a lot of that. And it's great to see Brent and the team in action, but also hear the thoughts behind that. So thank you again to Brent, to everyone at Grange for the work that they're doing and for sparing some of his time so that I could bring his thoughts to you. Thank you to all of you for tuning in. Thank you to Shift Technology for sponsoring this episode. Really appreciate their support. And I will see you back next time for another episode of The Future of Insurance. Thanks, everyone.